When my daughter Jessica told me, "Mom, pack your bags and get out. You're just taking up space now," I thought my heart would stop beating. 3 days later, I was sitting across from our family lawyer, watching Jessica's face turn white as paper when he asked, "Did anyone actually read the entire will?" If you're new here, welcome to Grandma Stories, and make sure to hit that subscribe button. Let me tell you how I went from being thrown out like yesterday's garbage to watching my spoiled daughter crawl back begging for forgiveness. This story has more surprises than a birthday party. And trust me, the ending will shock you. Let me start from the beginning. I'm Dorothy Martinez, and for 45 years I was married to Thomas, the hardest working man you'd ever meet. He built his construction company from nothing, working 16-hour days until his hands were raw and his back was bent. Jessica was our only child, and Thomas spoiled her rotten from day one. While I was scrubbing floors and cooking meals, Jessica was getting dance lessons, piano lessons, and whatever her little heart desired. When Thomas had his stroke last month, Jessica barely visited the hospital. She was too busy planning her next vacation with that husband of hers, Marcus, who never worked a real day in his life. After the funeral, Jessica started acting strange. She'd come over with Marcus, walking through our house like she owned it already. They'd whisper in corners and measure rooms when they thought I wasn't looking. "Mom," she'd say with that fake sweet voice, "this house is way too big for you now. Have you thought about moving somewhere smaller?" What she really meant was, "When do I get my hands on Dad's money?" I should have seen the warning signs, but I was too busy missing Thomas to notice how greedy my own daughter had become. The lawyer, Mr. Peterson, called us both to his office for the will reading. Jessica wore her best black dress and those expensive shoes Marcus bought her. She sat there tapping her manicured nails, checking her phone every 5 minutes like she had somewhere important to be. When Mr. Peterson started reading, Jessica's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "To my beloved daughter Jessica, I leave my house at 425 Oak Street and all my business assets totaling $30 million. Jessica actually smiled during her father's will reading. She turned to me with this look of pure triumph, like she'd won some contest I didn't know we were having. But then Mr. Peterson kept reading, and Jessica stopped smiling. "However, these assets come with conditions that must be met for a period of 1 year following my death." Jessica's face changed. "What kind of conditions?" she interrupted. Mr. Peterson looked over his glasses and said, "Let me finish reading, dear." The room got so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I watched my daughter's confident expression slowly melt away as the lawyer continued. "If these conditions are not met, all assets will transfer to my wife Dorothy, along with additional penalties outlined in Section C." Marcus leaned forward in his chair, suddenly very interested in what came next. "The primary condition," Mr. Peterson continued, "is that Jessica must care for her mother Dorothy with kindness and respect, ensuring she remains comfortable in the family home for a minimum of 12 months. Jessica's mouth fell open. "That's ridiculous. Mom doesn't need me to babysit her." But Mr. Peterson wasn't finished. "Furthermore, any attempt to remove Dorothy from the home, coerce her into leaving, or treat her with disrespect will result in immediate forfeiture of the entire inheritance." I sat there stunned. Thomas had known exactly what Jessica would try to do. He'd set a trap, and Jessica was about to walk right into it. After we left the lawyer's office, Jessica was furious. She drove me home in complete silence, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. When we got to the house, she slammed the car door so hard I thought it might break. "Mom," she said through gritted teeth, "we need to discuss living arrangements." What she meant was, how can I get around Dad's stupid conditions? For the next week, Jessica tried to be the perfect daughter. She brought me flowers, cooked dinner twice, and even sat with me to watch my favorite TV shows. But I could see the anger burning behind her eyes every time she looked at me. Marcus made everything worse. He'd come over and whisper poison in Jessica's ear about how unfair the will was, how I was manipulating the situation. "Your dad was probably not thinking clearly when he made that will," he'd tell her. "Old people get confused about money. Old people get confused." I was only 68 and sharper than both of them put together. I started noticing them having hushed phone conversations, always stopping when I entered the room. Marcus would spread papers across our dining table, pointing at numbers and talking about opportunities we're missing and time-sensitive investments. One evening, I overheard Jessica crying in the kitchen while talking to someone on the phone. "I can't do this for a whole year," she sobbed. "Every time I look at her, I think about all that money just sitting there while she watches her soap operas and knits scarves." She was talking about me like I was some burden she had to carry. The next day, Jessica's attitude completely changed. The fake sweetness disappeared, replaced by cold politeness. She'd make my meals but slam the plates down. She'd wash my clothes but leave them wrinkled in a basket. The mask was slipping, and underneath was someone I didn't recognize as my daughter. Things got really bad when Marcus lost his job at the car dealership. Suddenly they needed money fast, and I was the only thing standing between them and $30 million. Jessica started saying horrible things. "Maybe you'd be happier at Sunset Manor with people your own age. This house is really too much work for someone your age. Don't you think Dad would want you to be somewhere safer?" Safer. I'd lived in this house for 23 years. It was my home, my sanctuary, filled with memories of the man I loved. But Jessica saw it as her property that I was illegally occupying. The final straw came on a Tuesday morning. I was making breakfast when Jessica stormed into the kitchen with 2 large suitcases. "Mom, I found you a nice place at Meadowbrook Assisted Living. They have an opening today, and Marcus is going to drive you over." I stared at her in disbelief. "Jessica, what are you talking about? This is my home." Her face turned red with anger. "This is my house now. Dad left it to me, and I'm tired of pretending to be your servant." The words hit me like slaps across the face. This wasn't grief talking or stress from losing her father. This was who Jessica really was underneath all the fake smiles. "Pack your things right now," she continued, her voice getting louder. "I've already paid your first month's rent. Marcus will help you carry your bags." I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd raised and loved, and saw a complete stranger. "Jessica, you can't do this. The will specifically says I have to stay here." She laughed, actually laughed. "The will says I have to take care of you. Well, putting you in a nice facility is taking care of you. Dad's lawyer can argue with that if he wants." Marcus appeared in the doorway like he'd been waiting for his cue. "Come on, Dorothy. Let's make this easy for everyone." I packed my belongings with shaking hands while Jessica stood in the doorway tapping her foot impatiently. 45 years of marriage, 45 years of memories, all fitting into 2 old suitcases. The photo albums, Thomas's reading glasses, the quilt my mother made for our wedding. I had to leave most of it behind. "You can come back for more stuff later," Jessica said, but we both knew that wasn't true. As Marcus loaded my bags into his truck, Jessica was already on her phone calling contractors about updating the master bedroom. She couldn't wait to erase every trace of her parents from her new house. Meadowbrook Assisted Living was exactly what you'd expect from the cheapest place in town. Thin walls, stale air, and the constant smell of industrial cleaning products mixed with sadness. My room was barely bigger than a closet, with a narrow bed, a small dresser, and a window that looked out at the dumpsters. The staff was nice enough, but they were overworked and underpaid. This was where my daughter had sent me to die, and she'd done it with a smile on her face. That first night, lying in that strange bed, I cried harder than I had since Thomas passed away. But something strange happened the next morning. Instead of wallowing in self-pity, I got angry. Really, truly angry for the first time in years. Who was Jessica to throw me out of my own home? Who was Marcus to treat me like garbage? I'd spent my whole life being polite, being accommodating, letting other people walk all over me because that's what good mothers do. Well, maybe it was time to stop being such a good mother. I picked up the phone and called Mr. Peterson's office. "I need to see you immediately," I told his secretary. "It's about the Martinez estate, and it's urgent." Mr. Peterson was shocked to see me. "Dorothy, I thought you were living with Jessica in the family home. That was the whole point of Thomas's arrangement. I explained what had happened. The forced eviction, the assisted living facility, Jessica's complete disregard for her father's wishes. Mr. Peterson's face grew darker with each detail. Dorothy, what Jessica has done is not just morally wrong, it's legally catastrophic for her. He pulled out the will and showed me sections I hadn't fully understood before. By removing you from the home against your will, Jessica has violated every single condition Thomas set. She's forfeited everything. Everything? I asked, barely believing what I was hearing. The house, the money, the business. All of it now belongs to you, Dorothy. Thomas included specific language about this exact scenario. He knew Jessica might try to find loopholes, so he made the consequences crystal clear. Mr. Peterson smiled for the first time since I'd known him. Your daughter just gave away $30 million because she couldn't be nice to her mother for 1 year. I sat there in stunned silence, thinking about Jessica at the house, probably picking out new furniture and planning expensive vacations. She had no idea what she'd just lost. But there was more. Thomas also included a clause about emotional damages, Mr. Peterson continued. If you were mistreated or forced from your home, Jessica owes you an additional $500,000 as compensation. I thought about that cramped room at Meadowbrook, about eating institutional food while Jessica enjoyed meals in my kitchen. She owes me money. She owes you everything, Dorothy. The question is, what do you want to do about it? For the first time in months I felt powerful. I felt like the woman Thomas fell in love with 50 years ago, the one who stood up to bullies and fought for what was right. We decided to let Jessica dig her own grave a little deeper before revealing the truth. Mr. Peterson suggested we give her enough rope to hang herself with. Let her enjoy her victory for a few more days. Let her make plans, spend money she doesn't have, tell people about her inheritance. The fall will be that much harder. I agreed, but I wanted to go back to Meadowbrook and wait. I wanted to be there when Jessica's world came crashing down. Dorothy, Mr. Peterson said as I was leaving, Thomas would be proud of you. He always said you were stronger than you knew. Back at Meadowbrook, I tried to act normal, but inside I was buzzing with excitement. I called Jessica that evening to check in, and let her know I was settling in well. She sounded distracted, probably busy spending my money in her head. That's nice, Mom, she said dismissively. Marcus and I are having the house painted next week. Fresh start and all that. A fresh start with money that was no longer hers. I hung up and couldn't stop smiling. The other residents probably thought I'd lost my mind, but I'd actually found it for the first time in years. 3 days later, Mr. Peterson called Jessica and asked her to come to his office immediately. There's been a development with your father's estate that requires immediate attention, he told her. I was already waiting in the conference room when Jessica arrived with Marcus in tow. They both looked nervous but tried to hide it with fake confidence. Mr. Peterson, Jessica said, settling into her chair like she owned the place. I hope this isn't about Mom's living situation. I've made sure she's very comfortable at Meadowbrook. The lawyer looked at her for a long moment before speaking. Jessica, I asked you here because we need to discuss the terms of your father's will. We already discussed them, Jessica replied, her voice getting defensive. I inherit everything as long as I take care of Mom, which I'm doing. Mr. Peterson opened the file and pulled out several documents. According to the will, you were required to ensure your mother remained comfortable in the family home. You were required to treat her with kindness and respect. You were forbidden from removing her from the property against her wishes. Jessica's confidence started to waver. She's being taken care of. That's what matters. Jessica, Mr. Peterson said slowly, did you actually read the entire will? The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Jessica looked confused. Of course I read it. You read it to us right here in this room. I read you the summary, the main points. But did you take the copy I gave you home and read every single page? Jessica's face went pale. What are you getting at? Mr. Peterson smiled, But it wasn't a friendly smile. I'm getting at the fact that you've just lost everything your father worked his entire life to build. Marcus leaned forward, his face red with anger. What kind of lawyer tricks are you trying to pull here? No tricks, Mr. Williams. Just consequences. Jessica, by removing your mother from her home against her will, you have violated every single condition of your inheritance. As of today, you no longer own the house, the business, or any of your father's assets. The room went dead silent. Jessica stared at him like he was speaking a foreign language. That's impossible, she whispered. Dad left everything to me. No, Jessica. Your father left everything to you conditionally. You failed to meet those conditions. Where does everything go then? Marcus demanded, his voice cracking with panic. Mr. Peterson turned to look at me, and I saw Jessica's eyes follow his gaze. For the first time since entering the room, she seemed to notice I was there. Everything goes to Dorothy, as specified in Section C of the will. The house, the $30 million, the construction business. All of it now belongs to your mother. Jessica's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Mom, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You knew about this. I looked at my daughter, this woman who had thrown me out of my home like garbage, and felt a strange sense of peace. I knew your father loved me enough to protect me from you. Jessica's face crumpled. The mask of confidence, the fake concern, the manipulative sweetness. All of it fell away, leaving behind a desperate, greedy woman who had gambled everything and lost. Mom, please, she begged. You have to understand. I was trying to do what was best for everyone. By putting me in a nursing home so you could steal my house? Marcus jumped up from his chair, pointing his finger at Mr. Peterson like this was somehow the lawyer's fault. This is ridiculous. You can't just change who inherits money because of some technicality. It's not a technicality, Mr. Williams. It's the law. Thomas Martinez was very specific about his wishes, and those wishes have been violated. Marcus turned to me, his face desperate. Dorothy, you can't seriously be going through with this. Think about what this will do to Jessica, to the grandchildren. The grandchildren. Jessica's 2 kids who barely knew I existed because their mother was too busy to bring them around. The grandchildren will be fine, I said calmly. Their mother should have thought about them before she decided to steal from their grandmother. Jessica was crying now, real tears for the first time since her father's funeral. Mom, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I was grieving and not thinking clearly. Please don't do this to me. A mistake. Grief. She'd planned my eviction like a military operation, called contractors before my bags were even packed. Jessica, you told me to find somewhere else to die. You said I was useless. Those weren't the words of someone who was grieving. Those were the words of someone who had been waiting for your father to die. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat. There's one more thing, Jessica. Your father also included a clause about emotional damages. Because of your treatment of Dorothy, you owe her an additional $500,000 in compensation. If Jessica had been pale before, she was now completely white. 500,000. Where am I supposed to get that kind of money? That's not my problem, I said, surprised by how strong my voice sounded. Maybe you should ask Marcus. He seemed to have plenty of opinions about how to spend money that wasn't his. Marcus collapsed back into his chair, his head in his hands. This can't be happening. We already put a deposit down on the new car. We booked the cruise to Europe. I quit my job because you thought you could treat me like dirt and get rewarded for it, I finished. Jessica looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. Mom, what do you want? Tell me what I have to do to fix this. For a moment, just a moment, I felt sorry for her. This was my daughter, the little girl I'd rocked to sleep and taught to ride a bicycle. But then I remembered the look of triumph on her face when she thought she'd gotten rid of me forever. Jessica, some things can't be fixed. Some words can't be taken back. You showed me exactly who you are when you thought you had all the power. I stood up and gathered my purse, feeling stronger than I had in decades. Mr. Peterson, please handle the paperwork to transfer everything back to my name. And Jessica. She looked up at me hopefully, like maybe I was about to forgive her. You have until Friday to move out of my house. The hope died in her eyes, replaced by something cold and desperate. As I walked toward the door, Jessica called after me. Mom, wait. What about us? What about your family? I turned back one last time. My family. Jessica, you stopped being my family the moment you decided I was disposable. A family protects each other. They don't throw each other away like trash the first chance they get. Marcus was crying now too, probably thinking about all the money he'd already spent in his head. Dorothy, please be reasonable. We can work something out. I am being reasonable, Marcus. I'm doing exactly what my husband wanted me to do. Protecting myself from people who would hurt me for money. The drive back to Meadowbrook gave me time to think about what I'd just done. Part of me felt guilty. What kind of mother takes everything away from her own daughter? But then I remembered Thomas's voice. Dorothy, you're too kind for your own good. Sometimes people mistake kindness for weakness, and they take advantage of you. He'd been right about Jessica. She'd seen my kindness as weakness and tried to exploit it. Well, she'd just learned that weak people don't survive 45 years of marriage to a man who built an empire from nothing. That evening, Jessica called me 17 times. I didn't answer. She sent text messages begging me to reconsider, promising to be a better daughter, swearing she'd learned her lesson. But I'd heard all her promises before, seen all her fake tears. People don't change overnight, and Jessica had shown me her true nature when she thought the consequences didn't matter. The next morning, she showed up at Meadowbrook with flowers and a box of my favorite chocolates. The staff told her I wasn't accepting visitors. The flowers ended up in the trash where they belonged. Mr. Peterson called with updates. Jessica's trying to contest the will, he told me. She's hired a lawyer and claims you manipulated her somehow. I laughed out loud at that. How exactly did I manipulate her into throwing me out of my own house? That's what her lawyer is struggling with, apparently. The evidence is pretty clear. Security cameras at Meadowbrook show her dropping you off against your will. Staff members heard her tell you to pack your things, and there's no documentation of you agreeing to the move. Jessica was grasping at straws, trying to rewrite history to make herself the victim. A week later, I moved back into my house. Walking through that front door felt like coming back from the dead. Jessica had already started redecorating, painting over the soft blues and greens Thomas and I had chosen with harsh whites and grays. She'd thrown away my plants, packed up my books, and replaced our family photos with generic art from some expensive store. It was like she'd tried to erase every trace of the life Thomas and I had built together. But now I had time to put it all back the way it should be. The first thing I did was change all the locks. The second thing was to call a contractor to repaint everything back to the original colors. Jessica had spent thousands of dollars on changes that I was going to undo, and every dollar came out of money that was never really hers in the first place. The irony was delicious. As I walked through the house, I found evidence of the life Jessica had planned to live here. Expensive wine in the cellar, designer clothes still in the closets, reservation confirmations for fancy restaurants. She'd been spending money like it was water, never imagining it could all disappear. 2 weeks later, Jessica showed up at my door. She looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes were wrinkled, and she'd clearly been crying. Mom, please let me in. We need to talk. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. She walked into what used to be her house like a ghost visiting her former life. I lost the car, she said quietly. The bank repossessed it yesterday. Marcus is staying with his brother because we can't afford rent anywhere decent. I felt a tiny twinge of sympathy, but I pushed it down. Jessica, I'm sorry you're having problems, but they're problems you created yourself. Mom, I know I hurt you. I know what I did was wrong. But don't you think this punishment is a little extreme? You're destroying my entire life over one mistake. One mistake. She still didn't get it. Jessica, you didn't make one mistake. You made dozens of them. You lied to the lawyer about where I was. You forged documents to change the utilities into your name. You threw away my belongings without asking. You told people I was senile and couldn't make decisions for myself. Which part of that was the one mistake? She sat down on the couch, my couch in my house, and put her head in her hands. I was desperate, Mom. Marcus lost his job and we had so many bills. When Dad died and left all that money, it seemed like the answer to our prayers. I thought maybe he would have wanted me to take charge since you'd never handled big financial decisions. There it was. The same condescending attitude that had gotten her into this mess. Even now, even after losing everything, she still believed I was too stupid to handle my own affairs. Jessica, your father left me that money because he trusted me to handle it. He didn't leave it to you because he knew exactly what you'd do with it. Exactly what you did do with it. She looked up at me with desperate eyes. What can I do to make this right? Tell me what you want, and I'll do it. What I wanted was my daughter back. The sweet little girl who used to help me bake cookies and tell me about her dreams. But that little girl was gone, replaced by this greedy stranger who saw me as an obstacle to her happiness. Jessica, there's nothing you can do. Some bridges can't be rebuilt once they're burned. She started crying again, but this time I didn't comfort her. Mom, please. I'll pay you back the $500,000 somehow. I'll get a job, I'll work 2 jobs if I have to. With what qualifications? You haven't worked in 15 years because you were too busy spending Marcus's money and waiting for your father to die. The words came out harsher than I intended, but they were true. Jessica had lived her entire adult life waiting for other people to take care of her. I can learn, she insisted. I can change. Just give me another chance. I looked at my daughter and saw a woman who had never faced real consequences for her actions. Every time she'd made a mistake, someone had rescued her. First Thomas, then Marcus, then she tried to rescue herself by stealing from me. Jessica, chances are earned, not given. And you've shown me repeatedly that you can't be trusted. She sat in silence for a while, maybe finally understanding that this wasn't going to end with me forgiving her and giving back the money. Finally, she stood up and walked toward the door. Mom, I want you to know that I did love Dad. And I do love you, even if I have a terrible way of showing it. I wanted to believe her, but love isn't just words. It's actions. And her actions had shown me exactly how much her love was worth. Jessica, if you really loved me, you wouldn't have thrown me away the minute it became convenient. She nodded like she finally understood. I know I destroyed everything good between us. I just hope someday you can forgive me. After she left, I sat in my quiet house and thought about forgiveness. Could I forgive Jessica for what she'd done? Maybe someday. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean pretending that actions don't have consequences. Thomas had protected me from Jessica's greed, and now I had to protect myself from her manipulation. The money wasn't really the point. It was about respect, dignity, and the right to be treated like a human being by your own child. Over the next few months, I settled into my new life as a wealthy widow. I hired a financial advisor, made some smart investments, and started supporting causes I cared about. The local senior center got a new computer lab funded by the Dorothy Martinez Foundation. The Children's Hospital got new equipment. I was finally able to use Thomas's hard-earned money for things that mattered, instead of watching Jessica wasted on cars and vacations. Every time I wrote a check to help someone, I thought about how different things would have been if Jessica had just been kind. Jessica tried to contact me a few more times. Birthday cards, Christmas gifts left on my porch, letters asking for forgiveness. But I'd learned something important. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to let them face the consequences of their choices. Jessica needed to learn that actions have results, that other people's feelings matter, that love isn't something you can turn on and off when it's convenient. Maybe losing everything would teach her those lessons. Maybe it wouldn't. But that was her journey to take, not mine to fix. A year after Thomas's death, I received an unexpected visitor. It was Sarah, Jessica's oldest daughter, now 16 and old enough to drive herself places. She stood on my porch looking nervous but determined. Grandma Dorothy, I know Mom said I shouldn't bother you, but I wanted to see how you were doing. I invited her in, surprised by how much she'd grown and how much she looked like Jessica at that age. "I'm doing well, sweetheart. How are you handling everything with your parents?" Sarah sat down carefully, like she was afraid of breaking something. "It's been hard. Mom cries a lot and Dad is always angry. They fight about money constantly. But Grandma, I wanted you to know that I never agreed with what Mom did to you. When she told us you wanted to move to that place, I knew she was lying. You loved this house too much to ever leave it willingly." Smart girl. She'd inherited more than Jessica's looks. She'd gotten some of Thomas's common sense too. "Sarah, your mother made choices that hurt a lot of people, including herself. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of it." She nodded, looking older than her 16 years. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Of course, honey. Do you think you'll ever forgive Mom? I mean, I know what she did was awful, but she's still your daughter." It was the question I'd been asking myself for months. "Sarah, forgiveness is complicated. I can forgive your mother for hurting me, but I can't pretend that what she did was okay. And I can't trust her not to do it again." We talked for hours about school, her plans for college, her memories of her grandfather. It felt good to connect with family again, even if it was just one person. When she got ready to leave, Sarah hugged me tight. "Grandma, I'm going to come visit you regularly if that's okay. And when I turn 18 and can make my own decisions, I want to have a real relationship with you." I held her close, feeling hopeful for the first time in months. Maybe Jessica had failed as a daughter, but she'd raised a good kid despite herself. 6 months later, I ran into Marcus at the grocery store. He looked terrible. Thinner, older, wearing clothes that had seen better days. He tried to avoid me, but I called his name. "Marcus, how are you doing?" He turned around reluctantly, his face red with embarrassment. "Dorothy, I want you to know that I'm sorry for my part in what happened. I should have talked Jessica out of her plan instead of helping her." It was the first genuine apology I'd heard from either of them. "Marcus, I appreciate you saying that. How is Jessica?" He looked down at his shoes. "She's working at a diner downtown, trying to save money for an apartment. We're divorced now. Turns out when the money disappeared, so did a lot of other things between us." I felt a stab of sadness. Not for Marcus, but for Jessica. She'd lost her family, her home, her husband, and her mother, all because she couldn't wait 1 year to inherit legally. "I hope she finds some peace," I said, and I meant it. As I drove home from the grocery store, I thought about peace. I'd found mine in this house, surrounded by Thomas's memory and the life we'd built together. I had enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my days, enough to help causes I believed in, enough to spoil Sarah and any other grandchildren who wanted a relationship with me. Jessica was somewhere across town, learning hard lessons about consequences and character. Maybe that was how it was supposed to be. That evening, I sat in Thomas's favorite chair and opened a letter that had arrived that morning. It was from Jessica, but different from her other attempts to contact me. No begging, no manipulation, just honest words written in her own handwriting. "Dear Mom," the letter began, "I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness or money. I'm writing because I finally understand what Dad was trying to teach me, and what you tried to show me my whole life. I've spent the last year working at Murphy's Diner, serving coffee to people who work harder in 1 day than I worked in 10 years. I've learned what it feels like to worry about rent, to choose between gas money and groceries, to have people look down on you because of your job. For the first time in my life, I understand what real work means." The letter continued for 3 pages, and with each paragraph, I could see glimpses of the daughter I'd raised underneath the selfish woman she'd become. She wrote about learning to budget, about the satisfaction of earning her own money, about the shame she felt when she looked back at her behavior. "I know I can't undo what I did to you," she wrote, "but I want you to know that I'm trying to become someone Dad would be proud of, someone you raised me to be." I folded the letter carefully and put it in my jewelry box next to Thomas's wedding ring. 2 years passed peacefully. I traveled to places Thomas and I had always planned to visit but never had time for. I saw the Grand Canyon, walked on beaches in Hawaii, toured museums in New York City. I sent postcards to Sarah, who was now in college studying social work, inspired by her grandmother's story to help families in crisis. Jessica sent a birthday card each year, never asking for anything, just wishing me well. I could see in her careful handwriting that she was growing into someone better than the person who had thrown me out of my home. On the 3rd anniversary of Thomas's death, I decided to visit his grave. I brought fresh flowers and sat beside his headstone, telling him about the life I'd built with the inheritance he'd protected for me. "You were right about Jessica," I said to the marble stone. "She needed to learn the hard way. But you were also right about me. I was stronger than I knew. Thank you for believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself." A gentle breeze rustled the trees above us, and I chose to believe it was Thomas telling me he was proud. As I drove home from the cemetery, I made a decision. I pulled over and called Mr. Peterson. "I want to set up a trust fund," I told him. "If Jessica can prove she's been steadily employed for 2 years, if she stayed out of trouble, and if she writes me a letter explaining what she's learned about family and respect, I want her to receive $50,000. Not as an inheritance, but as a gift from a mother who hopes her daughter has finally grown up." It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was hope. Mr. Peterson was quiet for a moment. "Dorothy, are you sure about this? After everything she put you through?" I thought about Sarah, about the grandchildren I barely knew, about the possibility that people really could change if they faced enough consequences. Thomas left provisions in his will because he believed in second chances, but only after first chances were properly lost. Jessica lost her first chance. Maybe it's time to see if she's earned a second one. The lawyer agreed to draw up the paperwork, with strict conditions that would prevent Jessica from seeing the money as anything other than what it was, a test. 6 months later, Jessica came to my door again. But this time was different. She looked healthy, confident in a way that came from earning her own way in the world. Her clothes were simple but clean, her hair was styled professionally, and most importantly, her eyes were clear. "Mom," she said, "Mr. Peterson told me about the trust fund. I wanted to thank you, but also to tell you that I don't want the money." I was shocked. The old Jessica would have grabbed $50,000 without hesitation. "I've been thinking about what Dad really wanted," she continued, "and I don't think it was for me to eventually get money from you. I think he wanted me to learn to stand on my own feet, to earn respect instead of demanding it, to understand what it means to work for something instead of expecting it to be handed to me." She stood straighter as she spoke, and I could see Thomas in her posture, his determination and pride. "I've been promoted to assistant manager at the diner, and I'm taking night classes in business management. I don't need your money, Mom. I need to prove to myself that I can build something with my own hands." For the first time in years, I felt truly proud of my daughter. "Jessica, your father would be so happy to hear you say that." She smiled, and it was genuine in a way her smiles hadn't been since she was a child. "Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. But I want you to know that everything I do from now on, I'm going to do in a way that honors the parents who raised me better than I behaved." We stood on my porch, mother and daughter, with 3 years of pain between us, but maybe, just maybe, a foundation for something better. "Jessica," I said carefully, "would you like to come in for coffee? I have some pictures of Sarah's college graduation that I think you'd like to see." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. We spent 3 hours at my kitchen table, looking at photos and talking about Sarah's future plans. Jessica told me about her work at the diner, about the regular customers she'd grown to care about how different her life looked when she earned everything in it. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a beginning. As she prepared to leave, Jessica paused at the door. "Mom, I have one question. Why did you offer me that money in the trust fund?" I thought about Thomas's wisdom, about second chances and the long road to redemption. "Because your father didn't just want to punish you, Jessica. He wanted to teach you. And I wanted to see if you'd learned the lesson." She nodded, understanding passing between us. "I think I'm finally starting to understand what he was trying to teach me. It wasn't about the money at all, was it?" "No, sweetheart, it never was about the money. It was about character, respect, and understanding that love isn't something you can take for granted. Jessica hugged me then, carefully, like she was afraid I might disappear. "I love you, Mom. And I'm sorry it took me losing everything to remember how to show it properly." I held my daughter close, thinking about Thomas and how proud he would be to see this moment. "I love you too, Jessica. Welcome home." 6 months later, Jessica and I had dinner together every Sunday. She would bring stories from the diner, and I would share updates about my charity work and travels. Sarah joined us when she was home from college, and slowly we were rebuilding what Jessica had torn down. It wasn't the same relationship we'd had before. It was better, built on honesty and respect instead of obligation and assumption. Jessica had learned to value what she'd once taken for granted, and I had learned that sometimes loving someone means letting them fall far enough to find their own way back up. One Sunday, as we were cleaning dishes together, Jessica said something that surprised me. "Mom, I've been thinking about Dad's will, and I realize now that it was the kindest thing anyone ever did for me." I looked at her curiously. "How so?" She dried a plate thoughtfully before answering. "He could have just left me the money and let me waste it. Instead, he created a situation where I had to choose between my greed and my love for you. When I chose greed, I lost everything that really mattered. But losing everything taught me what actually had value." "And what has value?" I asked, though I thought I knew the answer. "Family. Real relationships based on respect and care. The satisfaction of earning something through your own effort. The ability to look at yourself in the mirror and be proud of who you see." Jessica smiled as she said it, and I could see that she really meant it. Dad knew that money without character would destroy me. By taking away the money, he gave me the chance to build character. It took me 3 years to understand that, but I finally do. As the months passed, other family members slowly began reaching out. Marcus, now remarried and apparently doing well, sent a card acknowledging his role in the original scheme and expressing genuine remorse. Jessica's younger daughter, Emma, started visiting on her own, curious about the grandmother she barely remembered. Extended family who had sided with Jessica during the legal battle quietly began including me in gatherings again, perhaps recognizing that I hadn't been the villain in this story after all. The most surprising call came from Eleanor Hayes, Marcus's mother, who had once tried to bribe me to drop charges against her son. "Dorothy," she said stiffly, "I owe you an apology. I was wrong to suggest that Kevin's crimes were somehow your fault or your responsibility to forgive. I was protecting my son from consequences he needed to face, just like Jessica needed to face hers. I hope you can accept my belated acknowledgement of that." It was a gracious admission from a proud woman, and I respected her for making it. 5 years after Thomas's death, I received an invitation that brought tears to my eyes. Jessica was getting married, not to someone wealthy who could provide for her, but to David, a carpenter she'd met at the diner where they both worked second jobs while pursuing their dreams. The wedding invitation was simple, handmade, and beautiful. At the bottom, Jessica had written in her own handwriting, "Mom, would you do me the honor of walking me down the aisle? I know Dad can't be there, but having you beside me would mean everything." The wedding was small, held in the backyard of the house Thomas and I had shared, the house that was now mine. Jessica had asked if she could hold the ceremony there, not because she wanted to reclaim the space, but because she wanted to honor her father's memory in the place he had loved most. As I walked her down the makeshift aisle between folding chairs filled with friends from the diner, co-workers from her night school, and the family members who had stood by us through everything, I felt Thomas's presence as strongly as if he were walking beside us. In my speech at the reception, I talked about second chances and the long road to redemption. 5 years ago, I told the gathered guests, my daughter and I lost each other to pride and greed and misunderstanding. But Thomas, Jessica's father, was wiser than both of us. He knew that sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what's really worth keeping. I looked at Jessica and David, holding hands and looking at each other with a kind of love that's built on respect and shared struggle, and I knew Thomas would approve. Jessica learned that money without character is worthless, I continued, and I learned that love without boundaries isn't really love at all. Thomas's will didn't just protect my inheritance, It protected our family by forcing us to confront the truth about who we were and who we wanted to become. The guests applauded, but more importantly, Jessica smiled at me with genuine love and gratitude. The daughter who had once thrown me out like garbage had grown into a woman who understood the value of everything she'd once taken for granted. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Jessica and David approached me together. "Mrs. Martinez," David said formally, "I want you to know that I understand the history here, and I promise you that Jessica will never have to choose between her family and anything else ever again. I've seen how hard she's worked to rebuild your relationship, and I respect what that means." He was a good man, I could tell, the kind who measured wealth in relationships rather than bank accounts. Jessica took my hands in hers. "Mom, I know I can never give you back those 3 years when we were apart, or undo the pain I caused you. But I want you to know that every day since then, I've tried to live in a way that would make you and Dad proud. I hope I'm finally succeeding." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw a woman who had been broken by consequences and rebuilt by determination. "Jessica, your father would be so proud of who you've become. And so am I." Later that night, after the last guests had gone home and the rental company had taken away the chairs and tables, Jessica and I sat on the porch swing Thomas had installed when she was little. The house was quiet, filled with the kind of peace that comes after a day of celebration. "Mom," Jessica said softly, "do you think Dad knew this would happen? That we'd end up here together, stronger than we were before?" I thought about Thomas's careful planning, his understanding of human nature, his faith that people could change if they faced the right consequences. "I think your father hoped for this," I replied. "I think he believed that underneath all the selfishness and entitlement, the daughter he raised was still there, waiting to come back out. He just had to create the right circumstances for her to emerge." Jessica leaned against my shoulder like she used to do when she was small and the world seemed too big for her to handle alone. "I'm glad he was right," she whispered. "I'm glad he never gave up on me, even when I gave up on myself." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars come out over the house that had seen so much drama and heartbreak and healing. Finally, Jessica spoke again. "Mom, I have something to tell you. David and I are expecting a baby." I felt a surge of joy mixed with gratitude. A new generation, a fresh start, a chance for Jessica to be the kind of mother she'd learned to be the daughter. "Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful news. Your father would be over the moon." "We want to name him Thomas," Jessica said. "If it's a boy. And if it's a girl, Dorothy. We want our children to know the story of their grandparents, the whole story, including the mistakes and the consequences and the forgiveness. We want them to understand that families can break and heal, that love has to be earned and re-earned, and that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is letting them face the results of their choices." I started crying then, thinking about Thomas and how this was exactly what he would have wanted. Not just reconciliation but understanding. 6 months later, I held my grandson Thomas David in my arms while Jessica recovered from delivery. He had his grandfather's strong chin and his mother's determined expression, and when he looked at me with those serious baby eyes, I whispered to him all the things I wished I could tell his grandfather. "Your grandpa Thomas was the wisest man I ever knew," I told the baby. "He loved your mama so much that he was willing to let her hate him for a while so she could learn to love herself." As I rocked little Thomas, Jessica watched us from her hospital bed with tears in her eyes. "Mom, I want you to know that David and I have talked about this a lot, and we want you to be involved in this baby's life from day one. Not just as a grandmother, but as a partner in raising him. We want him to learn from your wisdom, your strength, your example of how to forgive without forgetting, how to love without enabling." It was everything I could have hoped for. Not just reconciliation with my daughter, but a true partnership in building the next generation of our family. 2 years later, as I pushed young Thomas on the swing set David had built in my backyard, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. From the day Jessica threw me out with 2 suitcases to today, watching her chase her toddler son around the garden she'd helped me plant, seemed like several lifetimes. The little boy laughed as he ran through the sprinkler, and Jessica laughed with him, and I realized that this was what Thomas had been hoping for all along. not just my security but our family's healing. Grandma Dottie, push me higher, Thomas Jr. called out, using the nickname he'd invented for me. As I pushed his swing toward the sky, I thought about his grandfather and how proud he would be of this moment. The money had been important. It had given me security and independence and the power to make choices about my own life. But the real inheritance Thomas had left us wasn't financial. It was the knowledge that love has to be based on respect, that family means protecting each other, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's worst impulses. That evening, as Jessica and her family prepared to go home to their own house, a modest but comfortable place they'd bought with money they'd earned together, she hugged me goodbye. Mom, thank you for not giving up on us, even when we gave you every reason to. I held her close, this daughter who had been lost and found, who had learned the hardest lessons life can teach. Jessica, your father didn't give up on you, so neither could I. That's what family does. We keep believing in each other's potential to grow. After they left, I sat in Thomas's chair with a cup of tea and thought about the letter I was writing to young Thomas for when he was old enough to understand it. I wanted him to know the whole story. His mother's mistakes, my heartbreak, his grandfather's wisdom, and the long road to healing we'd all walked together. I wanted him to understand that families aren't perfect, but they can be strong if they're built on truth and respect and genuine love rather than obligation and guilt. Dear Thomas, the letter began, by the time you read this, you'll be old enough to understand that people make mistakes and that consequences matter and that the best families are the ones that face their problems honestly. Your grandfather left us all a gift when he died. Not just money but the chance to become better people than we were. Your mother took that chance and became someone worthy of your respect. I hope that when you're faced with difficult choices, you'll remember that the right choice isn't always the easy choice, but it's always the one you can live with. As I finished the letter, I looked around my house. The house that had seen so much pain and joy, loss and redemption. On the mantel sat photos of Thomas, of Jessica's wedding, of little Thomas taking his first steps in this very room. The inheritance had given me security, but the real treasure was this. A family rebuilt on honesty, a daughter who had learned to value what she'd once taken for granted, and a grandson who would grow up knowing that love is something you earn and re-earn every day. Thomas had been gone for 7 years, but his wisdom lived on in every choice we made, every lesson we learned, every moment of grace we offered each other. The will that had once seemed so cruel had actually been the kindest gift he could have given us. The chance to lose everything that didn't matter so we could find everything that did. My daughter had thrown me out thinking she was claiming her inheritance, but what she'd really done was given us both the opportunity to inherit something far more valuable. The knowledge that real family bonds can survive anything if they're based on genuine love and mutual respect. And that, I thought as I turned off the lights and headed to bed, was the greatest inheritance of all.